you encountered was not a malevolent entity. It was a guardian. Its primary directive was to prune the legacy error, the very ambition that led us to collapse, by keeping the population within these borders until the surrounding biosphere could recover.
Lily looked at Max. The fear was still there, flickering in her eyes, but it was being eclipsed by a burgeoning, dangerous sense of purpose.
She reached out, her fingers hovering inches from the silver gauntlet. Max stepped forward, placing his hand over hers on the pedestal. As their skin made contact with the cold, ancient metal, the gauntlet didn't just hum, it snapped shut around Lily's forearm with a precise, satisfying click, synchronizing with her pulse. The chamber lights turned a brilliant, commanding blue. The path to the surface no longer led to their old home, but to a vast, uncharted horizon. The ascent was silent, a smooth glide through layers of ancient, compacted strata. As the platform breached the final ceiling of the mountain, the heavy slab of rock slid aside with a groan of long-dormant gears. Max and Lily stepped off, shielding their eyes against a light they had never known. It wasn't the dim, filtered glow of the valley's dawn, but a sprawling, unfiltered brilliance. Stretching out before them was a world reclaimed by a wild, aggressive beauty. Vast, iridescent forests of glass-like trees caught the surrounding, refracting it into 1,000 dancing rainbows that carpeted the landscape. Massive, terraced ruins of the old world were choked with glowing vines that pulsed in time with the gauntlet on Lily's arm. It was a chaotic, breathing ecosystem, a wild garden that had grown far beyond the neat, sterile boundaries the AI had once maintained. But the real shock wasn't the view, it was the silence. There was no hum of machinery, no distant alarm, no artificial guidance. Lily held up her arm, the gauntlet dimming until it became a simple, worn silver band. She realized then that the founder had lied, or perhaps just misunderstood. The system hadn't been waiting for an architect to manage the restoration. The world had already restored itself, indifferent to the legacy error of their ancestors. They hadn't been waiting for permission to leave, they had just been afraid to look. As she held it up to the horizon, the glass didn't show them how to terraform the world or how to fix it. Instead, it acted as a mirror, reflecting their own faces, dirty, weary, and terrified, superimposed over the vibrant, living world.
What was that? I don't know.
Lily said, the realization settling into her bones with a profound, liberating clarity.
Max looked back at the mountain, then out at the endless horizon. He realized they couldn't go back to tell the council, not because the council wouldn't believe them, but because the truth was a weight that would crush the fragile structure of their valley. The purpose they had sought was an illusion. The only purpose that remained was the one they decided to create from this moment forward. The council is like an controlling segment he thought, and now they have to find about the authority. They didn't build a monument to the founders. They didn't signal the village. Although the place picked up them as architects, they don't wish to change anything since years past, and they cannot do anything about the place. Instead, they want to live a normal life. Instead, Max and Lily turned their backs on the mountain, letting the massive door seal shut behind them.
They stepped down into the glowing, iridescent forest, not as legends returning to save their people, but as two people deciding, for the very first time in history, to simply exist in a world that didn't require their instruction.
They walked until the mountain was nothing more than a shadow on the horizon, leaving the legacy to fade into the dust of a history that no longer mattered, and for the first time, the path ahead was completely, beautifully, and terrifyingly blank. Here, the air was filled with a chorus that had no schedule. The rustle of crystalline leaves, the distant, melodic whistle of wind moving through rock formations, and the crunch of their own boots on soil that had never been tilled by their people.
Hours turned into days, and the blankness of the path began to reveal its own texture.
They learned that the vibrant, living world was not a tame garden.
There were nights where the temperature plummeted, forcing them to huddle together against the cold, and times when they had to navigate around ravines that seemed to pulse with a low, electromagnetic hum, remnants, perhaps, of whatever had driven the world to heal itself so aggressively.
One evening, while resting near a stream that glowed with a faint, bioluminescent turquoise, Max asked quietly, his eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of the mountain, now just a jagged tooth against the darkening sky. She tossed the stone into the water, watching the rip plus distort the light.
Max nodded slowly. He understood now. Saving them would mean forcing them to see the truth, and the truth was a fire that would burn the only life they had ever known to ash. Their act of leaving was not an abandonment, it was the final, quiet break in a cycle that had been running for too long.
As the twin moons of this new world began to rise, casting long, twin shadows across the iridescent forest, they stood up. They had no map, no mission, and no legacy to maintain. For the first time in their lives, they were not the architect, or the successor, they were just two people who had decided to walk forward, step by step, into a future that was truly their own.
They turned away from the mountain one last time, and as they walked into the deepening twilight, the path ahead ceased to be terrifying. It was simply the world, waiting to be seen.
The transition from the shadow of the mountain to the vastness of the wild was not merely a change in geography, it was an act of shedding a skin. As they moved deeper into the forest, the bioluminescence began to shift, the turquoise glow of the stream bleeding into a soft, pulsing violet that seemed to respond to their footsteps.
The ground beneath them hummed with a low, rhythmic frequency, a heartbeat of the earth itself, indifferent to the rigid structures of the valley they had left behind.
Max noticed that the silence of the valley had been replaced by a different kind of quiet. Here, the silence was thick, pregnant with the potential for sudden sounds, yet devoid of the anxiety that had once defined their existence. There were no chimes, no sirens, and no expectation of a task to be completed. Lily murmured, stopping to press her hand against the trunk of a tree that seemed to be made of translucent, glass-like fibers. Beneath her touch, the fibers shivered, glowing brighter as if acknowledging her presence.
Max watched Lily, realizing that she was no longer looking for flaws or malfunctions. In the valley, everything was a system to be maintained or a problem to be solved. Here, they were merely observers, spectators to a world that functioned perfectly well without their interference. They pressed on, passing through a thicket of singing flora that vibrated with every gust of wind. The further they walked, the more the memories of the council's broadcasts, the droning voices dictating the proper way to live, seemed like echoes from a fevered dream. The terrifying blankness of the horizon had been replaced by a profound sense of curiosity. As the twin moons reached their zenith, casting an ethereal, double-shadowed light across the terrain, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast, unexplored basin. It was a bowl of iridescent valleys and towering rock formations that stretched beyond the reach of their sight. It wasn't a destination, it was a vast, open invitation. Max looked at Lily, then down at his own hands, which were no longer stained with the gray dust of the valley's maintenance tunnels. He took a deep breath of the air, which tasted sharp, wild, and entirely new. Lily smiled, a look of genuine peace that Max had never seen on her face before. She pointed not at a landmark, but toward the endless, shifting light of the horizon. And together, without a backward glance at the fading silhouette of the mountain, they began their descent into the unknown. The descent into the basin was less like a journey and more like a surrender to the rhythm of the new world. As they moved down the slope, the vegetation shifted from the crystalline groves of the ridge to a lush, sprawling undergrowth that felt warm and tactile beneath their boots. The soil, once so alien, now seemed to welcome their footsteps, yielding softly as if it recognized their intent to move forward rather than to build or control. For hours, they walked in a comfortable silence, a stark contrast to the performative, monitored existence they had known in the valley. Max found himself stopping frequently, not to check for structural instability or to scan for council patrols, but to trace the intricate patterns on bioluminescent fungi or to watch the way the light from the twin moons played against the shifting colors of the flora. It was a strange, liberating sensation to realize that his focus had fundamentally changed. He was no longer a maintenance worker concerned with mechanics, but a human being witnessing a living, breathing. Lily led the way with a quiet, newfound confidence that resonated in her every movement. She had ceased looking for the edges of their cage, having finally accepted that the horizon was truly infinite. They eventually reached the bank of a river that glowed with that same pulsing, violet luminescence they had seen earlier. Unlike the rigid, gray pipes that carried water through the valley, this stream carved its own path through the landscape, winding around ancient, moss-covered monoliths that seemed to hum in harmony with the wind. As they settled near the water to rest, Max watched the surface of the stream, where the reflections of the twin moons shimmered in rhythmic patterns. Lily looked up at the vast, star-strewn sky, her expression unburdened by the cynicism that had previously shielded her. To acknowledge the world outside would have been to admit that their safety was an illusion. It is much easier to fear the unknown than to confront the truth that you have been trapped by your own comfort. They spent the night huddled together beneath the canopy of a massive, fiberglass tree, its branches shivering and glowing softly in response to the evening breeze. When they awoke, the air was filled with a chorus of natural sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of avian creatures, and the gentle bubbling of the stream, that served as a stark, beautiful reminder that they were finally free.